What's up guys? Welcome to AnimeKouhai. If you'd like to help me out, please hit the like button and subscribe to my channel.
Ah yes, I was quite pleased to find so many well-equipped Imperial soldiers. But the real prize was defeating that iron golem.
Shion took in Adalmann's gleeful tone, realizing he wasn't just skirmishing with adventurers in the labyrinth, he was methodically gathering resources. The rocky landscape from floors 51 to 60 occasionally spawned golem monsters, and among these, iron golems contained high-quality iron. By defeating them, Adalmann could store the materials in the labyrinth, where they would eventually yield premium magisteel. Taking down iron golems served both as effective combat training and resource collection, achieving multiple goals at once. Shion groaned, realizing the scope of Adalmann's earnings. Or rather,
wait a second, is this guy making more money than I am?
The thought suddenly struck her. It was possible that other guardians were also dabbling in their own money-making ventures. Then there was Shion, who hadn't cared much about money before. Back in her ogre village, they had inherited the skills and knowledge of otherworldly travelers, so she understood the basics of economics, but in reality, Shion never paid much attention to money. It was only recently that she began to take notice of it. It seemed almost silly to worry about Adalmann earning more than her when she didn't even own a wallet. As Shion's ranks grew, she started to realize this wasn't an ideal situation. Her methods of skirting around the issue could only go so far. The Yomiuri executives were feeling the financial strain even more than she was, and ignoring the need for funds was no longer an option. Meanwhile, Benimaru and Soi had been doing quite well for themselves financially. They'd used their profits to upgrade all their gear, ensuring their squads had attractive benefits, making it a desirable place to serve. Even Gabble had a decent income. Together with Vester, he had filed patents on their research, which provided him with steady earnings. His troops were paid as well, so they had no trouble affording equipment. That left Shion as the one with the least money. Ultima, tasked by Rimuru to lend her a hand, approached the bewildered Shion.
Now, Shion-san. Don't stress over money. Just take it from the enemy.
Her suggestion was both outrageous and wicked. As chief prosecutor of the Public Prosecution Office, responsible for rooting out the country's major crimes, such advice was rather troubling. Yet, Shion felt a sudden clarity after hearing it.
You know, you're absolutely right.
See? I'm a genius.
The two shared a good laugh. Adalmann, overhearing them, sighed internally, thinking, I should have known better than to bring up finances here on the battlefield. True, Adalmann had taken adventurers' equipment in the labyrinth, but only after ensuring they were safe. Despite his skeletal appearance, he still retained a bit of his old human reasoning. When arranging for equipment, he gave artisans extra incentives to receive better service. He would never demand, do it for free, like Shion might. This approach allowed him to get decent gear fairly quickly.
I'd better keep this to myself around Shion Dono.
Adalmann wisely decided that silence was his best option. Loose lips lead to trouble, he thought, as his good friend Master Gadra, who had come to support him, nodded in agreement. Adalmann also knew there was some truth to the idea that his newcomers were better equipped than Shion's seasoned troops. Common sense dictated that the strongest should receive the best gear. It would be an issue if he drew criticism over this, so he aimed to divert Shion's attention swiftly.
Well then, Shion Dono, let's proceed as planned and take the lead.
Shion turned to face the enemy and gave a firm nod.
Got it. I'll let you go wild, so go ahead and unleash everything you've got.
Adalmann sighed with relief, grateful to have her permission. And thus, the battle began. Dagruel's forces, intending to sweep through and claim the battlefield before advancing to the Holy City, found themselves suddenly hindered.
The nerve.
Dagruel observed as a missile tore through his front line, muttering in frustration. This was not how he had envisioned it. His plan to strike while the enemy was vulnerable had completely backfired.
So, what's our move, elder brother?
His loyal younger brother, Glassword, asked. Only then did Dagruel realize he'd spoken his thoughts aloud.
It's been ages since we had a real fight. Let's let them get a taste of it first, just enough to remind them who they're dealing with.
Although the first offensive had fallen short, Dagruel wasn't overly concerned. The enemy's defense was more intense than anticipated, but this was no major obstacle for him. The Chained Titan army was 30,000 strong, including a mix of fresh recruits and weaker fighters. Even if the less capable soldiers dropped out, keeping the best would be enough. In fact, letting the weaker ones pull back early would increase the survival rate when the real battle heated up.
Understood. I will send back the new recruits and anyone lacking ultra-speed regeneration.
Glassword replied, nodding at Dagruel's intentions. Familiar with the stakes, he remained calm and quickly issued the command. This sense of ease among the generals helped the soldiers keep their cool as well, and the ranks quickly reorganized without a hitch. Following this, the giants began hurling rocks with their immense strength. This wasn't some pre-planned assault, just sheer force, smashing massive stones down to manageable chunks and flinging them at will. The impact was devastating, on par with the missile launchers used by the bone archers, proving just how absurdly powerful the titans were in combat. The hail of rocks pounded the long wall, severely damaging sections and reducing nearby monsters to dust. Yet, the wall itself withstood the onslaught. Beneath the battered surface, faint glimmers of magisteel could be seen reinforcing the structure.
That Ruminus has set up a real piece of work here.
The barrier around the long wall complicates things. Unless we breach it, this fight is going to stay at a standstill.
Glassword's analysis was detached, his tone neutral. Dagruel observed, unperturbed. His initial strategy had failed, but with Demon Lord Rimuru leading the opposition, this result wasn't entirely unexpected. Initially, he'd believed Michael would handle Rimuru, but he'd recently heard that Rimuru had managed to defeat Michael. No longer an up-and-coming demon lord, Rimuru had grown into a formidable figure, worthy of being seen as an equal, or even a superior. Rimuru's strength lay in his ability to analyze his opponent's strategies and twist them to his own advantage. Dagruel knew well from their past interactions that Rimuru was fiercely protective of his allies, willing to minimize their casualties at all costs. This was apparent in Rimuru's current approach, deploying immortal monsters first. Although these creatures could move even in daylight, which was unusual, they were weak by nature. Still, their power couldn't be overlooked. These weapons were like nothing he'd seen before, and even his lower-ranking warriors had no chance against them. Some soldiers had tried specific attacks, but the zombie soldiers were there to intercept, launching debris at high speed in place of magic. The attacks were surprisingly effective against giants. Though their race was naturally resistant to magic, these assaults were physical, bypassing that defense. Lower-ranking fighters without regenerative abilities were swiftly overwhelmed. Thankfully, the undead weren't particularly durable themselves, and the battle became a brutal exchange of ranged attacks with heavy losses on both sides. The long wall, reinforced by Ruminas, seemed designed to support such tactics, though it irked Dagruel to be struggling against an opponent he would usually crush with ease.
Unbelievable. I didn't think I was underestimating Rimuru, but I was wrong. My warriors falling to this swarm of low-level undead.
Dagruel muttered in frustration. Memories stirred within him, and he recalled his past self. He didn't bear any ill will toward Rimuru and would have preferred not to be enemies with his old friend. Yet, haunted by memories from his days as an ancient god, Dagruel remembered the times he had fought to rule the world, challenging the god Veldanava to assert his existence. He believed that this defiance was precisely what Veldanava had wanted. A child surpassing their creator, that was a pure wish. He couldn't disappoint his god by failing to live up to those ideals. Many had been given the burden of the god killer, and Dagruel was one of them. He couldn't stop now, even if it meant turning against his friends, even if he wasn't certain it was the right path. And then, an old memory surfaced.
Ever since she killed my friend Twilight, Ruminas and I have been at odds. That's yet another reason this battle must happen.
Yes, Ruminas, the demon lord whom Dagruel viewed as his rival, had committed a grave act by killing one of her own. Dagruel's feelings toward her were a conflicted blend of bitterness, envy, and admiration over her slaying of his closest friend. With all these emotions tangled together, Dagruel's perspective on Ruminas was far from simple. Suddenly, his mind shifted to his sons, Dagura, Liura, and Dabura. Their presence on the battlefield was unmistakable. Even though they were on opposite sides this time, he wondered what kind of strength they would show. His sons, raised with little hardship, had grown strong in raw power but lacked true combat experience. Compared to an actual demon lord, they were likely to crumble in the face of true might. Although he cared deeply for them, Dagruel had limited expectations. No, he had deliberately chosen not to push them into rigorous training, sparing them from the heavy burden of a destiny marked by rebellion against one's own kind. Such defiance of their creator was simply unthinkable. Yet his sons were untouched by that curse.
Yes, I will stay true to my own path. So, you must each live boldly, following the beliefs that guide you.
Of course, to embrace freedom, they needed the power to defend it.
So, what about the boys, big brother?
Fen asked, a hint of amusement in his voice.
I get it. If they confront us as enemies, we'll take them down without hesitation. If they can learn from that pain, good. If not,
they would simply vanish. This was the world's unbreakable law, only the strong survive.
I hope you've grown stronger, at least enough to face me without fear.
Dagruel was unwavering. He would carry out his role with absolute resolve. His spirit was as clear-cut as his duty. He was a warrior through and through. And soon, the rampage of the Titans would sweep fiercely across the battlefield, leaving chaos in its wake. As Adalmann and his team launched into battle, Shion readied herself.
You've heard what I said. No need for a speech. Do you all understand our mission?
We will seize the enemy's equipment and use it ourselves.
Shion's troops were indeed exceptional. They understood her intentions perfectly and displayed their eagerness. Satisfied with their response, Shion nodded in approval. The Yomigari and her fan club had grown to a considerable size by now. Shion had only recently started considering the expense of outfitting her forces, though this had been a long-standing concern for Gobzo and the others. They had eventually resigned themselves to it. Since Shion's followers were competent individuals, it was assumed they could acquire their own weapons and armor. Normally, their lack of gear was accepted, but today they had an opportunity to gather supplies in a more unconventional way. Gobzo briefly wondered if they might get in trouble later, but given their history, he decided not to worry about it. In warfare, looting was typically discouraged, and stealing from civilians was strictly forbidden. However, disarming foes to neutralize them was fair game. As Adalmann had demonstrated by repurposing weapons taken from the Imperial Army, it was often left to each commander's discretion to decide how to handle equipment seized in battle.
A big thanks to the AnimeKouhai patrons who made this video possible. Jared Bressler, Havox, Speed Saber, Curtis Loban, Judah Herrera, Just a Guy, Miss L.W. Hernandez, Jason Martin, Zach Rosen, Jerry Sladek, Ray Perez, Jay, Donald Williams, Day of Light, John M, Godman Gaming, Markithian Tidwell, Adrian, Kumo, T. Bush, JV, Thomas, Christ, Joshua Cousins, Jose Hernandez, Khalid, Christian Deshazer, Divine C. Harris, Montyboy 98, Ruben, Yuki Iki, Gray, Isaac, Koala King 93, Quilly Buckner, Alver, Darius King, Normal Defate, Vicente Baharias, Joshua Andrade, L, Gary Miles, Dragon Spawn 666, J. Rule, Nate, Leiron Sangkap, Lucas Guet, Jason Martin, Christopher Mash, Charles Bailey, Sky T, Diego Ginoza, Andre Hamilton, Martin Ramos, Guy Ensley, Simon Rode, Emperor WSA, Miko Espinosa, Gobi Lin, Pratik Bandari, Faiz Mansour, Jackson Early, Smexy, Carl Stephen Bernadel, Gareth Hashimoto, Steven Madison, Vasto Lord, Marl Barsha, Ralph Ignacio, Efrain Hernandez, William Locke, Kamal Luke, Jahid Hassan Lipu, Spencer Candila, Ian Sikibiol, Thanakorn Lee Sawat, KACP9R, The Harv, Drayden Yamauchi, Alex Buthanu, Michael Brinkley, Nathan Alexander, Mario Kanoy, Karam Faraj. Thank you so much for helping out. I'll see you guys in the next video.